So she got like crucified on it, like holding on to the cross and
All right, let's look at our handout. So what we're going to talk about today, we're recording also, so that's good. What we're talking about today, what we're talking about right now, is we're talking about our second discussion into the Industrial Revolution. And we're going to talk about some ways that some inventions have changed the way that we get things and the way that we make things and how much it costs. In the picture on the screen, who is this guy? That's Gandhi, right? And he's sitting in front of something. In fact, what is this device that he has? What is he making? That's a what is it, Logan? That's a spinning wheel, right? So he's actually making material to make clothes. And that's cool and all. And Gandhi thought it would be a really good thing to show self-reliance for people to make their own clothing. But if it was up to you to make your own clothing with a spinning wheel, how well do you think you guys would, how well would you do? Yeah, I mean, also like think about the time that it will take to make this. Well, what we're going to see in today's lesson, we're going to see that machinery and the Industrial Revolution is going to make the way and the time that we have pottery and cotton and iron radically different than it was before, which is why, again, we call this the Industrial Revolution. So let's look at our first traditional area, which is pottery. And the thing about pottery is that we actually know this already. Where were the best pots and dishes and porcelain, the best of those best? Where traditionally did we get those from? From China, right? And so if we're getting these things from China, what's going to be true is that it's going to be probably pretty expensive. What is true is it's probably going to take a while to import it because I'm bringing it in from another part of the country or a different part of the world. And so the price is going to be high. And so Europeans want access to pottery and to plates and to porcelain. And so there's going to be a couple of things that they're going to do to try to make changes to make it more accessible and to make it more affordable. And for number one, what they do is they introduce something called mass production. And this is the process of making identical items by breaking the process into simple, repetitive steps. Breaking the process into simple, repetitive steps. So I'll give you an example. Let's imagine that we're making a car, building a car. And let's imagine if we're building a car in a factory and we have an assembly line. What if your job, Cameron's job, was to, lower the engine into the car? And all day long, that's all Cameron did was Cameron lowered engines into cars. And let's imagine Logan's job was to put the wheels on the car. He's got a tool and he's bolting in those wheels. And let's imagine Samantha's job is to put the headlights on. All day long, hundreds of headlights, that's Samantha's job. All day long, Cameron lowering engines. All day long, Logan doing the tires. Do you have a broad skill set in that scenario that I just outlined? No. You do basically one simple thing all day long, and you're probably pretty good at lowering the engine or the headlights or the tires, but you don't really know a whole lot about cars. One thing about cars, you're pretty quick and you don't have a lot of skill. If you don't have a lot of skill, do I need to pay you a lot of money for that? No, because you don't really have a broad skill set. That's what mass production does. And that's good because the problem with porcelain before the 18th century, number two, was that it was expensive and it was a Chinese luxury product. Before the Industrial Revolution, the problem with porcelain was that it was expensive because it was a Chinese luxury product. I'm bringing this from all the way on the other side of the world. We need to figure out a way to make this stuff ourselves. We need to find a way to make it cheaper and more affordable. Number three, there's also a reason why Europeans were super interested in making this stuff cheaper. And there were two new beverages that were sweeping Europe after the year 1500. New drinks that Europeans came to love. And both drinks served hot. What are these new world transforming drinks? Coffee and tea. Now, of those two drinks, which one will the British for sure embrace? Tea. Now, in America, we might drink hot tea a bit, but I can almost guarantee that we're more of a coffee drinking society than our British cousins across the ocean. So coffee and tea, these new hot beverages, they require better quality cups so you can enjoy them. And this is another reason why Europeans are looking to making better and cheaper devices. Number 4, a guy you should know by name is this guy, Josiah Wedgwood. And his most important contribution is something we call, and you'll write down, division of labor. And that's kind of what we were talking about earlier with mass production, that when you divide up labor into steps, you're going to speed up the process we're making it. We're also, with division of labor, going to give Logan not a broad set of skills, not a broad set of skills, but very limited. And if Logan has very limited skills, I don't really have to pay him very much. And so we'll write down this created mass-produced items. I'm going to be able to crank out these items in mass numbers, created mass-produced items. And there's two good things about this in the mindset of a buyer. It says for letter B that workers need fewer skills and less pay. Because, you have only one step of the process that you need to know about. You have fewer skills, and if you have fewer skills, then you'll need less pay. So these are some of the things that result from mass production. These are the things that happen from division of labor. You have less skill, so I think you probably need less pay. And number 5, finally, on this section for pottery, this contribution and strict discipline and new machinery allowed for lower cost and improved quality. The amount, like I used to be paid an arm and a leg to get stuff from China for my fine china, but now I have lower cost, and now I've got actually improved quality because it's like machines that are going to be helping to make this. And so this is a win-win. Like I may not have been able to afford cups and plates and pottery, but now it's something that's available to even a common person like me. Well, that's pottery. What about our next area to study, which is the cotton industry? Now, the bummer about cotton, like as you can see from this picture, is that it's a laborious process. And the laborious process means that the price is going to be quite high. And they're going to realize, what we want to do? We want to do it faster than what Gandhi in this picture is going to be able to do with him and his spinning wheel at his house. And so we need to get machines involved. And so for number 1, it says something that made the process quicker and cheaper is the vocabulary word. We'll write down mechanization. If you don't know, that's mechanization. Mechanization means using what? Machines, right? Because Gandhi's great, but there's only so much he's going to be able to make with that spinning wheel that he has. And so in the Industrial Revolution, the question is, okay, can I break it down in simple steps? Check. Can I have division of labor? Check. Well, I want it even faster. Can I make a machine do it for me? That is what they're going to want to do. Number 2, cotton had also been expensive because of where it came from. It says on your handout that it had originally been a common cloth in China and India. And, we've talked about China and India a lot. These are two countries that have a lot of goods that Europeans want. China and India had silk, it had spices, it had rare products. And so really Europe is regularly looking to these two countries for items that they want. And number 3, because Europeans couldn't grow it in Europe. It was just really too cold to grow cotton in Europe. It wasn't the right environment. They wanted to adopt cotton because think about the alternative. What can you make your clothes out of if your clothes not made of cotton and you live in Europe at this time? What what is that? What other materials are there? Well, silk's from China, right? So that's like not from there either. What is from Europe that I can make clothes out of? And we still make clothes out of this today.
From Europe?
Yeah, available in Europe, yeah. It's not a plant, it's from an animal, actually.
Wool?
Wool, right? Now, what's the bummer about wool, though? It's hot. What else? Heavy. What else? It's kind of itchy. Like, like, oh, I want to put on a smooth wool shirt, like in July. So Europeans wanted to adopt cotton because it was cooler and softer than wool. They had plenty of access to wool because they have sheep, right? They have these animals that live there. But no one wants a wool t-shirt. I mean, do you want wool pants? Probably not. And they want cotton because it's cooler and softer than wool. Again, the problem is cost. So how can I lower the price from like this one guy literally making thread and then making fabric and then making clothes? Like that's a long process. So there's a guy named Richard Arkwright, and he's an inventor. And he invents something kind of funny that makes it not you on your own spinning this cotton, but a machine. And the machine has a funny name where it says Richard Arkwright. You can write down the name of the machine was a water frame. It's a 2 words, water frame. And that doesn't sound like a machine that makes thread at all, but it was a water frame. And take a look at some of the machines we see in the Industrial Revolution. We have Gandhi with his single spinning wheel replaced by this situation. And here, you've got who operating this machine? Well, that's actually not a child, this is a woman here. But if you look at it, I mean, it looks like there's like 20 rows from left to right, and maybe about 10, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 up from top to bottom. So that's like 200, right? That's a lot. And you have one person running it, and these machines are running all the time. So if you had a choice between the cost of this versus Gandhi, laboriously laboring, it's a no-brainer. What's going to happen to the cost of clothing with these machines running? It's going to go down. In fact, take a look at your handout for number 5 on your handout. It says, how many hours do you think it would take to spin 1 pound in India? I mean, if you have Gandhi here working, how long do you think it would take him to crank out a pound of material? 4 hours, 8 hours. Because listen, not only are you you have to make the thread, first of all, then the material. We're going to write down 500 hours. 500 hours to spin a pound of cotton from beginning to end. Now, imagine your car broke down, your new truck broke down, you take it to the mechanics, like, I can fix it, but I'm going to have to bill you for 500 hours of work. But how many hours are like in a work week?
First of all, when you're trying to build my house, I have to do 300 hours of me, and that's the whole time.
Okay.
Plus
Right. So there are 40 hours in a work week. That's full time. That's like over 10 weeks of work on your truck. What kind of bill are you going to have? Ridiculously large bill, right? Which is why cotton cloth was so expensive, which is why average people didn't have multiple pairs of clothing, which is why if people at this time looked at your closet, they would have to conclude that you must be one of the richest people who've ever lived. And in fact, as Americans, like the average American in this room, we're like in the top 1% of human existence because we have so much. I mean, Gandhi is literally wearing like a loincloth just covered his private part, right? You definitely have more probably clothes lying dirty on the bathroom floor than like Gandhi has right now. 500 hours. But then there's an arrow on your handout, And there's a different invention that also speeds up the process, has a funny name. It's called a mule. That's not like an animal, it's another machine. And with this invention called a mule, how long did it take to make a single pound? Well, right in front of the word, I put with mule or W mule, right in front of that, I want you to write down 3 hours with the mule. So with this new device, the mule, what used to take me 500 hours now only takes me 3, which is ridiculous. But it gets even better. Because if I fast forward to the year 1830, these machines get better and better and better. And now these machines only take me 80 minutes to make a pound of cotton. 80 minutes. So you can imagine, that's a revolution. Imagine that when you were born as a child, a pound of cloth took 500 hours to make. And that when you're an old man, what was once 500 hours now takes 80 minutes. That's a huge change. That's a revolution. You would have thought, man, we live in the craziest times of all. Like when I was a kid, I grew up in the 1980s. What kind of game system do we have in the 1980s?
Game Boy?
No, way before Game Boy. We had arcade games, but like home systems.
Yes, Pong.
Yeah, so what device ran Pong?
Nintendo.
No Nintendos yet.
It was,
Before Nintendo.
it was,
I am positive Game Boy
Game Boy
was
Nintendo.
later.
Yes, it was.
Before Nintendo was Atari.
Yeah, Atari.
And
Atari.
a leading game in Atari was Pong, which is basically 2 rectangles on either side of the screen with a square, which was like a ball, and you just like bounce it. And like at that time, we're like, this is the most amazing thing. It'll never get more advanced than this, Like it was incredible. Well, we've come a long way. Or even think about like when I was little, like one of the most popular cartoons we watched growing up was the Jetsons.
Oh,
And the Jetsons had like flying cars, and also you could talk to people through your TV. And we thought, man, that, one day, as soon as we can fly in cars, that's when I'll talk to people through the TV. But now we can literally do that, not even on our television, but just even on our phone. That's crazy. Like that's the revolution of technology. You have more processing power on your iPhone than the Apollo mission had when they sent the Apollo spacecraft to the moon. We have more processing power running our phones than the computers on the Apollo mission. That's a revolution, but no less the revolution than at this time. I mean, life radically changed. It says on the handout, cotton became more affordable due also to this guy, Eli Whitney's invention. What did he invent? The cotton gin. The cotton gin, you run it through and it has these hooks and it removes the seeds mechanically. That's great because like one of the hardest things about cotton is getting the seed out. Now that's good in the sense of it lowering the cost of clothes and all that kind of good stuff, but it's bad because now people say, well, I think I can make a lot of money doing cotton now. Like before, like, it's not really worth it. I mean, you got the seed and I don't want like someone just like spending all day long pulling it out by hand. But now with this machine, I want to plant more. And if I plant more cotton, unfortunately, who's going to be the one harvesting that cotton? Slaves. So because of this invention, cost of clothes went down. The amount of enslaved Africans doing this laborious work went up. So it's got bad. And it's not like they didn't care. They did care. They knew that it meant child labor. They knew it meant slaves. But you know what? I also want cheap clothes, Just like today. Like, we saw some videos about slave labor. Like, China right now is using slave labor for iPhone. They're using slave labor for Nike. But like, is that going to keep you from buying Adidas or Nike because they use slaves? Probably not. If you watch the credits of the Disney movie Mulan, they did the live action. At the end of Mulan, in the credits, they thank the concentration camp authorities that run those. And we saw the video about the Uyghur people in concentration camps. The Disney credits thank the police in charge of the concentration camps because they're willing to work with them. Now, are you going to cancel your Disney Plus subscription because they use slaves? Probably not. You're going to be like, well, that sucks, but I want my Nike, I want my iPhone, I want my Disney Plus. In the same way, people had questions, but they weren't going to cancel their cotton, their clothing because of those issues. Finally, iron industry. Iron was rare and expensive expensive outside of China before the 18th century. Before the 18th century, really China was the only place you could get it cheap. The reason why iron was so expensive was that iron, to make it good, you have to like melt it, because when you melt it, what happens to all the impurities when you heat it up to boiling? Well, they don't go away, but the impurities go to the top, and you can actually separate the impurities, making a stronger building material. The problem with iron is it takes a lot of heat to melt iron. Like, think about, like, what would it take to melt an cast iron pot that you have in your kitchen? A lot of heat. And they don't have a cheap way to do that. Like, I don't want to burn down a forest with all the wood to, like, melt iron. Until number two, they find something called coke. Now, not the drink, but coke is coal with the impurities cooked out that made it really cheap and very hot. So hot that if you burn coke, a type of coal, you could melt iron and therefore get rid of those impurities. This meant that we can actually start taking the iron out of the ground we have and building stuff. Number three, Britain's iron production. This is going to be two numbers before and after coke. Before coke, before using this form of coal to like melt down the iron and make stuff, Britain was putting out, you'll write down, 17,000 tons. 17,000 tons in 1740. I mean, that's a significant number, right?
That's actually all right.
That's before, it's in the blank, and 17,000 tons in 1740. But after coke, what happens? It goes up, you'll write down, to 3 million tons. Imagine you made $17,000 one year and then 3 million the next. That's a radical difference. That's a revolution. And that's what we see in the Industrial Revolution at this time. On your own, you'll use your textbook and the Industrial Revolution chapter to tell me about the symbolic role of Crystal Palace. If you just search for Crystal Palace, it'll take you to the textbook of where that place is. We'll go ahead and we'll stop there. And we'll continue to be talking about the Industrial Revolution next time we get together.